Rob, can you give us more detail on that point? I've been wondering this. In the United States, of course, we have an idea of what our relationship to the government is. And it has obviously been tested during the pandemic. But I think most Americans look to the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and kind of an understanding that ultimately the government is supposed to be responsive to our leadership as a democratic republic. How does the average Canadian view their relationship with government?
Well, I think that there's maybe a bit of more of a focus on the local level. And I would also say that, the charter in Canada is quite a young document and was only signed in the 80s. So, I think there is kind of a long-standing tradition of, Americans fighting for their freedom and prioritizing their freedom overall. I don't think you see that same, appreciation for freedom, free expression in Canada. And, we're not protected in the same way that Americans are. And I think in response to what we've been seeing in Ottawa, we are going to start seeing some crackdowns, not necessarily in the public square, but in the digital domain. And I think that's something that's coming a lot sooner than many Canadians realize, and will only be accelerated by this protest movement.
So I want to go back to that thing that you kind of touched on a little bit. I know you said it was a little bit, you felt that it was overblown, but the things that I've been reading say that essentially the commerce that's happening across the border has been completely stopped. That's $400 million a day for both countries. So it could affect the United States as well as Canada. I'm wondering, when is that going to trickle down to the average Canadian and to, people who want goods and services, which would include a lot of working class Canadians and Americans?
Yeah, and like I said, I think you have to treat the border demonstrations differently than what's going on in Ottawa. Since the early days, the border demonstrations haven't necessarily sat well with me just because of the economic damage that they're doing. Like you say, and the crossing near Detroit, that's one of the most important economic routes in North America. And you want to talk about the impacts that we're seeing to everyday Canadians. Well, we've already heard that, GM and Toyota, the auto parts plants that are a massive economic driver in Southern Ontario, they're already, closing down shifts. They're going to, be delayed by a week. They're not getting their parts in. They have to lay people off for the short term. So I think you're already seeing the economic consequences of that. And, the border movements is what is going to trigger, I think, a stronger police reaction from the federal government in Canada.
Why not a backing off? Why not a concession to the truckers' requests? So you think it'll be a police response, a forcible response? In fact, we've seen these reports that our federal government, the American federal government, via the Department of Transportation and Secretary Pete Buttigieg, as well as U.S. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, have been urging Canadian leaders to use their federal powers to shut down these truckers. Why wouldn't the Canadian government instead choose to concede and say, okay, maybe there is a legitimate grievance here. We can settle this by actually coming together?
Well, frankly, I think, the Trudeau Liberals don't want to be wrong. It seems to me like it's an ego thing at this point. They had an opportunity to come out and have dialogue with the truckers in the early days, and that was outright denied. And so I can't picture a reality in which they turn around and say, okay, we're ready for dialogue.
It does seem to me, Jason, of course, it was right, talking about the economic impact of shutting down bridge traffic. I'll take it from you that it's worth delineating the movement in Ottawa from the one that we're seeing on the bridges. But I got to imagine that the truckers who are sitting on those bridges shutting down commerce realize that this is a good way to compel a reaction from the ruling class in Canada and potentially the United States. I mean, if you put the profit margins on the line of the elite in both of these countries,
but it hurts the working class.
You're right about that, but this does get their attention. In other words, that when the powerful have their profits threatened, this is one of those truckers are probably thinking, this is how we can get some attention for this.
Yeah, exactly. And, they will get attention. The only thing is, what will the outcome be? And right. I think, unfortunately, that the outcome of this attention and these economic tensions are going to be a strong federal response at the borders.